Welcome everyone to our Consider Every Option or CEO event. Tonight focused on options in academia and nonprofits and STEM education and technology. And we have 4 fabulous panelists with us today that you're going to hear more about here shortly. Anna Dyson, our Assistant Director for the Women in Engineering program, has joined us as well. I'm Tricia Berry, Director of the Women in Engineering program. Thanks to all of you fabulous students for joining in this evening. The way this will work is I've got some kind of introductory questions for each of our panelists. We'll let each of them introduce themselves so you hear a little bit more about them and their stories. And then we'll open it up to questions from you all and let you all ask the things that you want to hear from them. And we can also look at some breakout rooms. So since we've got quite a few folks on here, I think we'll do maybe some breakouts as well so that you can have a little bit more intimate conversations with our panelists moving forward. So with that, I am going to have our fabulous panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about who they are and where they've come from, and a little bit about their educational and career paths. And I'm going to start, I'm just going to go in order of you all. I'm going to start with Karmon. Always finding that darn mute button.
I said, that's not the order on my screen. Someone else was going to start. No, hi, everyone. My name is Karmon Hill. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. Tricia was kind enough to let me use this wonderful background, but I am a graduate of North Carolina A&T State University for my master's and Florida A&M University for my undergrad. So I practiced engineering for a while, and I enjoyed engineering when I practiced. Once I had my children, I decided I was going to step out of engineering just for a bit to raise my kids. And I decided I would go in and get a teaching certificate. Well, I wound up enjoying teaching. And so my career path kind of morphed into more of an education route, which was a normal morph for me because a lot of my family, I come from a long line of educators and principals and, counselors and people like that. So that's kind of my career path. I work at Pearson Education as a math assessment specialist. And what I love is I'm still in the STEM world, and my group is actually a very techie group. So, if there are problems to solve, any one of those ladies there could have been engineers. Most of them are former teachers, but most of them are very technical. And I do enjoy the group that I work in. So I write math assessments. So let's see. So for standardized tests, that's what I do. Do you need me to say more, Tricia? Less? I'm good.
Maybe share a hobby.
Oh, okay. A hobby. I love writing poetry, which, speaking of morphing, has morphed into a song. I wrote a country song for my uncle. He was a Vietnam vet and he loved country music. So that's what I spent my efforts doing. It took a little while to get there, but I wrote the music. I came up with the melodies. So it's out there on YouTube. You need it, let me know. So yes.
You better put that in the chat. That's awesome. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Karmon. Aisha.
Okay, so I'm using the right button now. So thank you for this opportunity, and good evening, ladies here. I am Aisha Mayhew. I work for Texas Instruments, and I have a very interesting journey. As a kid, I was always interested in science and math, and I always did well. So I knew that I would have a career in the STEM fields. I just didn't know what I wanted to be. I started with wanting to do get a medical degree, and then kind of continue with education. But my family circumstances were such that I needed to get into something that I didn't have to spend many, many years in education. So I decided to go in the field of biomedical engineering because I already had the good math scores. And I said, you know what, I think that's a good compromise between the medical sciences and then the engineering, which was the math that I enjoyed doing. So I did my undergraduate in biomedical engineering because I felt like that's as close it can be to the medicine area. But in my final year, the capstone, I designed my own glucose meter, and I realized that I really enjoyed designing products and designing things. And so when I decided to pursue my master's here in the US, I went to Texas A&M, the other school, by the way. So I didn't put my maroon on, by the way. I have a brown, so I try to be neutral. And I do work with UT Austin very closely with the ECE chair. So I'm very, I would say that my husband's, a Longhorn and I am an Aggie, but we've been married for 20 plus years. So interestingly, I went to A&M, and then I got my degree in EE, specifically designing circuits. So if you think about any electronics, they have ICs in it, and that's what I designed as my first job. And I was extremely technical in that area. So I enjoyed doing that for a while, and I said, okay, I want to do more. So I went to the business side of things. As an engineering mind, I was just wanting to solve problems. So I didn't really care what I was doing, but I wanted to expand. And I became the business unit manager for one of the businesses in TI that I ran. And it is one of the most challenging jobs actually at TI. So if somebody asks you what's the most challenging job, that was one of it, because you were making profit for the company. And if you made loss, that was not a good thing. So anyways, I did a lot of different roles, marketing roles, business roles, systems roles, any technical roles and non-technical roles in TI. And then about 5 years ago, I got this opportunity to work with the TI's university program. So the university program of TI has been in existence for a long time. And I kind of started as the strategist. So my job is to create education content and kits for universities. So a lot of the students at UT actually use some of the kits that I've worked on, or even other schools, all top schools here. So that was my I felt like that was my passion, because I really enjoyed inspiring students. And I always felt like I need to do something that is impactful for me, that I feel I can use my engineering skills and problem solving skills so that I can impart this to the future engineers. So I kind of enjoy this as a passion to give back. Besides that, I'm also on several nonprofit boards where I serve to help advocate STEM, especially for women. So really fortunate to be part of this panel as well. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Bunmi.
Hello, everyone. Hook 'em horns. I am a Longhorn. I actually graduated in chemical engineering undergrad, and actually had first got into grad school, was looking in biomedical engineering. Didn't even think anything around education. So if you hear like where I am right now, you will say, what were you doing? Like, what was your plan? And I really never thought I would be in education. I thought maybe I'd be a professor. That was kind of my, end goal. And when I was doing research, realized that I didn't want to be in the lab all day. I really just enjoyed, being involved with everyone is around. So I ended up getting out of academia and going into the real world, doing tech. So I actually went into the tech space, worked for Oracle for a number of years. What was really interesting about that was when I was at Oracle, I decided to volunteer. It was a friend of mine said, let's volunteer for this after school program. I really want to get into education. I said, sure, I'll do that. You're my friend. Let's do this together. And really enjoyed it. Was with 3rd through 5th graders doing an after school program. I'm really connected to it because I'm a first generation American, and my parents, just knowing that immigrant experience, that really connected me with the students who were there, who were also, many were Black and Brown students, Latinx in particular. And so that, for me, really sealed the deal of wanting to be in that space. What it was also something eye-opening was just how fun it is to be with young people. You don't realize until you're with them, that energy. I would do this after school or after work, and I was energized after that, which to me was amazing. And it's like, wow, you know, I'm here doing this for about a couple of hours and I have all this energy. I'm completely pumped up. So I continued doing that for a number of years, trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. Talked with the other educators that were part of the after school program. They're like, oh, you're really great at this. Definitely, like, you could be a teacher. Decided to go back to school, get my master's in education. And when I got my master's in education, you know, after I did that, I taught for a few years. And I really realized that that wasn't, I loved teaching. It was something that I really enjoy still doing and being in the classroom. But I realized that I really wanted to kind of make an impact in a way that was different from what you would do in the classroom. I wanted to be able to kind of have my own boundaries, like not be set around boundaries. And I didn't really feel that the classroom like allowed me to do what it is that I wanted to do. And so I was able to kind of just see the nonprofit world. I saw opportunities there. First started off as an outreach educator, working with a science museum, doing that for a number of years, got to travel around the country. It was mainly on the West Coast at this time, but just got to like travel around, get to learn about the different school districts there, get to work with various teachers just all around and understanding that. And then I got into really deep into nonprofit, worked with junior achievement. It was different from kind of the science part. And what was nice that when I taught, I really wanted to stay within the STEM. So I actually had done a STEM specific degree, but around like K-8, because I wanted to really just connect the real world into STEM education and do that. So I kept on doing that. We was in financial literacy, but they were really kind of talking about STEM as well. So I was able to get into the STEM careers. And then that evolved into me kind of looking into other areas around educational nonprofits. I got to really work with a lot of nonprofit board. I was on nonprofit boards. I really started getting connected with the community. And even where I was at that point, I was in San Diego, and it was really around STEAM and STEAM education. And so I was able to really kind of jump into that space and really talk about what STEM was. And a lot of times people talk about the arts. We need to add the arts in STEM. And I'm like, because we need creativity from engineers. So I was like, engineers are already creative. What are you talking about? Like that you can not be an engineer and not have that imagination and creativity. So I really was that voice as well. Another thing, because I, was really in women's empowerment as well. There was that voice around women and how we gravitate towards STEM. So that was something for me that was really, really important. And so I always incorporated that. And then I decided after many years to go abroad. So I lived in Southeast Asia for about 3 years. And I had the opportunity. I would say it's really that my grounding and background in engineering allowed me to be able to just do whatever I wanted to do. And I could talk to people, about, oh, I want to try this. I want to get an education. I want to do that. They're like, well, you are an engineer, so you pretty much can do whatever it is you want to do. You have that skill set. And so I was able to go and advise a local nonprofit in Cambodia. I was able to teach chemistry, also do career guidance for high school students, college students as well, because I had the master's. And then I had the opportunity to also work with um, a science center, the one and only science center that they had in Cambodia, and really lead the programs there. So I had all those like experiences and decided to come back to the US, be closer to my family here, worked with Techbridge girls for a number of years, where the focus really is to empower girls from low-income communities to be able to really just, build their empowerment and belief that STEM is for them. And so I was doing that work for a number of years, and then just recently moved into my current position where it's still in STEM. I'm working actually with the Endless OS Foundation, and the focus really is looking within the barriers when it comes to the digital divide and being able to solve those barriers. So when it comes to access to internet, when it comes to access to devices and having access to computers or laptops, access to digital literacy, just really building that, as well as engagement. So still doing that work. We'll probably always be in educational nonprofits, and really would like to always be in STEM education as well, if I can.
Awesome, thank you. Brenda.
Hi, everybody. So great to be here. I am also a UT engineer. I did my PhD and master's at UT in biomedical engineering. So, so good to be there, or so good to be here again. So I actually got my undergrad degree in biological engineering and biomechanics from the University of Florida. It was kind of like a hybrid degree, so it was kind of half mechanical engineering, half bioengineering, which was pretty fun. And I did a ton of research throughout undergrad. I was like really on track. I was just, blinders on to really head to grad school. So that was just the thing that I knew I was going to do. So I worked my way through that. But I did most of my research in sort of mechanical engineering with like sort of bio flavor kind of stuff. And so I thought that what I wanted to do was actually go into biomedical engineering for grad school. So then I, arrived at UT. And by the way, it was actually, I had met Trisha at a conference as an undergrad, and meeting her and like knowing about all of the support for women in engineering at UT was one of the key reasons why I chose UT as like my grad program place. And so I joined one of the more biomaterials focused labs at UT Austin. And, there was a lot of things missing for me there. As I mentioned, a lot of my undergrad research was more on the mechanical engineering side. So I was building systems, building things to test different things. And so, I was in the lab, like putting together tubing and adding pumps and doing that kind of stuff. But then when I got into biomedical engineering at UT, like the lab I chose, I wasn't prepared for all of the amount of pipetting that I was doing. And I really missed a lot of that sort of like getting to build and design stuff elements. But it was a really slow realization, I think, that I realized that I wasn't really happy with what I had decided to focus on. I think I was already probably 3.5 years, almost 4 years into my PhD program when I realized I was going through a quarter life crisis. Of like, this is not what I want to do. What should I do? But because I had already sunk so much time into it, I was like, okay, well, if I just put in another year and a half, I can exit with that PhD cred and have that for the rest of my life. But like grad school is so great and flexible. It allows you to do a lot of other things at the same time. So it allowed me the flexibility to explore other options while I was also finishing up my PhD. So I'm always going to be grateful to my advisor for his flexibility on that. And what I ended up doing was thinking about all of the things that I really enjoyed making time for as extracurricular undergrad and throughout grad school. And a lot of that just brought me back to, doing engineering outreach activities, all about Girls' Day. And so I was, I was really excited about Girls' Day all of the time. So like, how can I do more of that all the time? And an internship opportunity actually opened up at the local children's museum, now called the Techbridge, in Austin, and they were looking for a STEM educator to come on board and support them. So I applied for that, got that, and it was I didn't realize how great of an experience it was going to be. It didn't sound like it was going to be that great at first, but it was sort of a split between developing activities, and then I also spent 2 half days a week in a classroom at UT Elementary, so I actually got to have them as teaching. It was really fun, and I was working 5 days and like 2 of those days I would also go work at the elementary school, and really flip my priorities here. So I decided I was going to go all in to move into STEM education, and I really liked the work that I did in the museum itself. So I knew that I wanted to go into more of the informal education side. So I started looking for jobs in science centers and museums, and that led me to working at the Tech Interactive. So the Tech Interactive is a science center in San Jose, California, which is near San Francisco. So that's where I am now. I currently lead the experience development team. We're about 10 people. And we design activities like the ones that you do at Girls' Day, except we also do sort of the exhibitry custom components for those as well. So it becomes a little bit more of like an exhibit-like thing that you can run every single day with thousands of kids. So it's super fun. I love it because it combines sort of like that technical engineering product design stuff that I had in my background with learning design, with user experience design as well. So it's a really fun mishmash of all of those things. I think the thing that I especially love about the Tech Interactive as sort of a focus area in terms of STEM education and learning is that we're more about specializing in engineering design challenges and sort of biodesign activities, or that's what my team specializes in anyway. And so we kind of look at it in terms of like in museums, that museums have a lot of curators of content that write all of these signs about like old artifacts and things like that, right? We don't curate content, we don't curate artifacts. What I think we do is that we actually curate variables for our visitors to experiment that help them to build those engineering and creative problem solving mindsets, and then to also help them see science as a creative process. So yeah, I'm excited about the work I do. I've been at the Tech for 7 years now, which is really unheard of to be at a job for that long in Silicon Valley. So guess I must love it that much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. So students, you can see that we have folks that they've had lots of twists and turns in their careers and lots of different experiences within this education space. So I'm going to ask them one question, and then I think what we'll do is jump into some breakout rooms so you all can ask them some more specific questions along the way. And I'm going to ask them, they all have their master's or their PhD, which is phenomenal that they all, went after that in some form or fashion, some within engineering, some in other spaces. So my question is kind of twofold. What made you pursue that master's or PhD? And some of you answered that a little bit already. But then what do you think that has contributed to your success and your role that you currently have? How do you think that has helped you in the work that you are doing? So we can go in the same order, perhaps, so you're ready to go and know who's coming up next. Now. So Karmon, you are up.
Okay, see, I'm ready this time. You threw me the last time. So as far as, so I have kind of a story to go with this, and it's a representation matters story. So when I was in undergrad, I did not think anything about getting a master's. Now my mom has a master's and she kept saying, you need to get a master's, you need to get a master's. And I was like, I don't want to get one. But she was the only one who was in my ear about a master's. What I was most disappointed in was that none of the teachers were in my ear about none of my professors said, you need to consider a master's. Have you considered? Now I heard them saying that to the other students who didn't look like me, but I did not hear them saying that to me. And at the time, it didn't bother me because I didn't want a master's degree anyway. But then once I got into the program that I was doing, I thought, you know, I called up one of my teachers because I was doing some research. And I called up one of my favorite material science teachers, and because that was what I was doing the diamond synthesis, thin film diamond synthesis for my master's thesis. And so I called up my materials design teacher and I said, you know, I have some questions. And then it was interesting, there was this shift and it was more like a peer-to-peer level, even though of course he obviously had a PhD, but I noticed how the level shifted and I liked that feeling of there being that respect that you get in engineering. And then even more so when you start moving up and you're getting that master. So I thought, wow, I get to play on the same playing field. But, you know, going backwards, I wish he had been the one who said, you know, you should consider. And I wish any one of those teachers, there was one male teacher and I didn't even have him. And he was one of the few African-American teachers. Well, actually he was African. He was from Ghana. And he was one of the only ones that said, you know, you should consider getting, you know, a PhD or a master's. And not because he knew me, but because he understood that it mattered hearing someone say that. So that's, you know, going as you and, you know, other professors interact with the students, by all means, remind them, tell those students that, yes, you know, the most unlikely seeming one can still very well wind up getting a master's degree. But going to why I wound up getting a master's degree, again, my mom was in my ear. I was living in Minnesota. So I started working at 3M right out of college. And 3M was wonderful, but 3M was, you know, all that winter weather you're talking about today, multiply that times -50. And yeah, and that's what and I was there, the record-breaking cold, record-breaking snow, record-breaking consecutive cold days with snow. I said, I have got to get out of here. And master's wound up being that route that got me out. So I wish I had some academic story about how I just really wanted to pursue. No, I had to get the heck out of Minnesota. And it was the best decision ever. I also recommend that if you do choose a master's program, you go where your heart resonates. I had a full scholarship to Georgia Tech, but I wanted to go to an HBCU. And I'm sure now that we're, you know, hearing about all the movements now, it's historically Black college and university. For me, that's where my heart was. I had just gotten through working in Minnesota in a town of 5,000 people with maybe a total of 3 that looked like me, which was fine. They were wonderful, wonderful people. It was in Hutchinson, Minnesota. As I was supporting a plant up there, a resident engineer supporting a plant, so basically a project engineer. But I recognized that that wasn't where I wanted my life to be. And so what I did was I said, I'm going to do what makes my heart happy. And that's when I went to North Carolina A&T, and that's where I got my master's from. So that's what sent me to get my master's. I spoke a little bit, and then I'm gonna be brief, but I spoke a little bit on how Trisha asked the question, how has that factored into your life, having a master's? And what I will say is, one, respect. You know, it's nice when people, you can have these conversations with people that, and they change their tone a little differently when you say, I have a master's in engineering. Of course, they always tell you about their cousin or their brother who has one too. And you're like, okay, great. But, but you know, it does give you that little bit of credibility, so to speak, especially if you can carry beyond just saying that. 2, it puts you in the most wonderful spots. I heard Bunmi mention getting to travel. That's the truth. You get to travel so many wonderful places and do so many wonderful things. I worked for NASA, and that was internship, but worked for NASA, worked for, like I said, 3M, worked for Dell. And that was another thing. I worked in a plant when I was at 3M, and I realized I wanted to get out of the manufacturing environment. And so when I went to grad school, it gave me that chance to reinvent myself. So I was able to go more into the development side. And that's what I did when I got to Dell. I did more of the developmental work when they were building computers. So yeah, that's what a master's can do. And I'm glad that I got it, you know, in spite of doing all that. I don't want this. I'm I'm glad that that opportunity kind of presented itself. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Carmen. Aisha.
So my story is a little different. As you know, I'm an immigrant. You know, in India, we are always wanting to do better and challenge ourselves. And honestly, I always wanted to pursue master's because that's what you do after you get your undergraduate. But there was this bridge that I had to cross, which was how would I pay for my tuitions, right? Because that is an important part for an immigrant who doesn't have much money. So I think that my journey to master's was like, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to come to America. That was an American dream, and, you know, opportunities and things that everybody talks about, you know, to me, that was very important, and have this freedom of being able to do whatever I wanted to do freely. Like you've heard about stories in the Middle East and all that. So it's all real. So we should feel very happy living in this country with all the freedom we had. So one was, how do I cross that chasm of coming here with having no money? So I was fortunate to have somebody help me with the first semester at Texas A&M. But lucky for me, I interviewed along with 200 other candidates for a TA assistant job, and I was lucky enough to get it. So what that meant was I have to pay in-state, and I get paid by the university to get my education, which was very important to someone like me. And I know you have that at UT as well. So that was the first chasm. The question of going into master's never occurred, that that's not going to be happening. So I lived off scholarship. I had my free education from A&M, which I'm always very, very grateful. But what I'll tell you is that the master's was not just a degree for me on a paper, which I actually have it right here behind, but the lessons it taught me, the journey that I had to take to get where I am today. So I'll just reflect back. When I came to A&M, I did not have a laptop. I was a biomedical, so I really did not have a computer science background as well. And the job that I got as a TA, you won't believe, I had to teach coding to an undergraduate students. And here I am, I don't have a laptop. I don't know how to code. I have to start teaching in 2 weeks. You know, that is a lesson I remember, because I had to get a coding book and start learning how to code. And in 2 weeks, I had to be in front of the undergraduates and teach them and keep up 3 weeks ahead of that undergraduate class. So imagine for someone who is a foreigner, fresh off the boat, who has no clue on you know, how to kind of navigate themselves, has to go through some barriers that, you know, are extremely hard for someone who is new and doesn't know, you know, the ways of the world. So I think when I look back, the master's is kind of the rite of passage for me, because it kind of gave me the strength of being able to take on anything. And that's what I have demonstrated through my life and my career at TI. It was not a degree. It was that journey. It was that ability to, you know, kind of make the impossible possible. So thinking of all the times and all the challenges that I had to face coming as an immigrant, especially not having the right funds for the school, and then working hard through this, cramming the coding and making sure that as correctly as possible, not making a fool of myself, not letting that undergraduate know that I do not know a lot of stuff, and I will know that in a couple of weeks. So I think having to endure that in front of adversity is what I call my rite of passage as my master's degree. And so whenever you're trying to do something difficult, and I feel like here's a challenge, I don't know how I'm going to do it, I think of that girl who was 20 years old and had to deal with that, and I'm not afraid. That's it.
That's awesome. And Anna wrote in the chat there, grit and resilience, right? It's figuring out how to navigate and make it all work. That's awesome. Thank you. Bunmi.
Thanks, Tricia. So what Karmon said and what Aisha said really resonate with me. And I would say that when I was actually undergrad, I was already doing research under actually Dr. Grant Wilson. still remember, and had been doing that research and had the opportunity to do internships at Motorola. So I kind of had like the research I was doing was related to what I was doing during the summer at Motorola. And so for me, because I was kind of in that space, it was something where I just said, oh, well, I guess that's my next step, to go in and, you know, do research. Representation was definitely something that was lacking during the time I was there. I remember my senior year having, I think there was one African-American professor, and maybe it was pretty recent, but we had our first woman professor in the chemical engineering department my senior year. And it was literally like, oh my gosh, finally, like I went to her office just to say hello. And she was doing biomedical engineering, leading that. And I was like, okay, maybe I should do that, like and study that. And so there was definitely an inspiration there. And I kind of ended up going to grad school, going into that space. And when I did do the shift to make that decision to go into education, for me, it really was that, okay, I'm doing a career change. And when you evaluate doing a career change, it's either, do I have the skills already to just pursue that shift, that pivot, or do I need to go back and get the necessary education to be able to kind of make that next step? For me, I just felt that I really needed to kind of have that grounding to do that. And so I ended up going and getting a master's.
Thank you. Brenda.
So I already sort of went over about why I decided to go to grad school. So I'll just kind of break it down a little bit more. Like, what are you doing when you go to a PhD program? What you're doing really is you go into that field that you've chosen, you read up on a bunch of the literature, and then you start thinking of, like, you learn everything about that sort of like subfield that you decide to go into. And then you start thinking about all of the questions that are unanswered, like thinking about the questions that you might want to answer and like dedicate your life to, maybe. So at its essence, when you're deciding what to do your PhD on, you are sort of developing your independent, like sort of critical thinking, problem solving skills. Like, you're developing really good analytical data skills. And so on top of all of the engineering skills you have, it's really all of this sort of like being able to craft your own questions, synthesize like what those results might be, what those findings are, and contributing that to the field. Those are things that you will probably have to do in any job that you will pursue. So going to grad school is a really great sort of practice for that. So I would really recommend doing that as sort of like a practice thing. And then, you know, it worked out well for me, as I mentioned, because grad school is pretty flexible. At least it was for me with my advisor, so that you can explore a lot of adjacent opportunities as well. I mean, there were other things that I did as well when I was in grad school. So, you know, I thought about, oh, maybe I should be an entrepreneur too. And so I competed in a couple of those like venture competitions and decided that wasn't for me. You know, I explored public policy for a little while and was like, I'm passionate about the science and people listening to the science, but not so much that I want to spend my whole day with politicians. So, you know, so grad school gives you a lot of flexibility to explore a lot of those different options while developing your critical thinking skills.
Fabulous. Well, again, what great tips and strategies and things to think about as you all are navigating your own educational and career pathways. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Karmon, Aisha, Bunmi, Brenda, thank you for joining in this evening and sharing your fabulous stories with us. Thank you to all of our students for joining in, and I'm sure asking phenomenal questions in our breakouts and having those great conversations.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.